Cities were never built from the ground up. They were built upon something forgotten. We think of cities as inventions of progress, as rising achievements, steel, glass, stone reaching up, expanding out, a symbol of civilization. But this is a lie. No city is ever truly new. They are not built from the ground up. They are built on top of ruins, of memory, of something deliberately forgotten. You walk the streets of your city and think it rests on soil, but beneath your feet there are layers, stories pressed into silence, bones sealed in stone, altars turned into basements, temples collapsed into basements. Foundations. Every city is a palimpsest, a manuscript scraped clean, but never truly erased. What you see above is only the most recent page. Look to Rome, its marble churches and imperial ruins, but underneath older things, Etruscan tombs, forgotten sanctuaries, even deeper hills built atop other hills, and still deeper silence. Paris, a city of light, but beneath it, the catacombs, tunnels of the dead, walls made of skulls. Not a metaphor, not poetry, literal bone. London. Walk long enough, and you tread on Celtic graves, Roman tiles, Saxon blood. Mexico City, built on the bones of Tenochtitlan, which itself stood upon something older still. Every new layer claims dominance by burying what came before. And yet, nothing stays buried forever. What we forget, the earth remembers. What we cover, the stones continue to carry. Every time you build, you must press down what came before. You must suppress it, seal it, silence it. But silence does not mean peace, only pressure. And pressure builds. Cities are not born, they are inherited, passed like a secret from one generation to the next, but the truth gets smaller each time, darker, more dangerous. What was once the heart of a city becomes its dungeon, its sewer, its locked vault. What was once sacred becomes a subway station. The river that once fed the people now runs beneath the pavement, enclosed in metal, forgotten. But the river does not forget. No one builds on empty ground. That is the first lie. Land is chosen, marked, consecrated, or cursed. A crossroads, a hill with a past, a place where the veil was thin. And before the city rises, something is always laid first. Not brick, not stone, but ritual. The soil must be named, claimed, opened. Something must be given so something can rise. And sometimes, what is given does not stay asleep. Why do we feel strange in old quarters of cities? Why do we avoid certain alleys, certain basements, certain doors? Because the ground beneath us is not empty. It remembers, it listens, it waits. The foundations were not meant for comfort, they were meant for containment. Architecture is not neutral. A city is not just a machine for living, it is a ritual we forgot how to read. The street is the spine, the buildings are teeth, the plazas are lungs, and the underground is the gut, the buried mouth, the place where the city digests what we no longer wish to see. We pretend to walk freely, but the grid is a pattern, a spell, and every block is a binding. So ask yourself, who chose the spot where your city stands? Why here? Why this ground? What was already buried before the first stone was laid? Because nothing is built on nothing. Something was always there, and it is still there, pressed beneath steel and glass, concrete and commerce. Not gone, just hidden. And the city knows it. It always did. Under every street lies a grave. You walk across the city. You see lights. You hear machines. You taste the rhythm of life, movement, commerce, laughter. You think the city is alive. But that is only the surface. Beneath the noise, beneath the steel and stone, beneath your feet, are bones. Always. Every city is built on death. Every street, every square, every cathedral and palace, they all stand upon the remains of those who came before. And not just a few, not a scattering, but millions. Death is not beside the city, it is its foundation. It is not a cemetery on the edge of town. It is the invisible root system beneath it. Skulls buried in layers, ribs and teeth and fingers crumbled into dust, children, warriors, priests, builders, whole generations compacted beneath foundations like clay, and they are still there. Paris. Beneath the cafes and galleries, beneath the polished stones and tourist streets, the catacombs, kilometers of tunnels, walls of bones, more than 6 million skulls, femurs, pelvises, stacked like bricks. Not a tomb, a network, a whispering system of remains. And people live above it, laugh above it, forget above it. But the dead are still listening. London. Its tube system runs through plague pits, graves dug fast, shallow, wide. They covered them, built roads on them, then houses, then offices. And now the train runs through death like a blade slicing through memory. Istanbul, Cairo, Mexico City, Athens, Prague, New York, Jerusalem. Layer upon layer of life, and beneath each one, a mirror layer of death. Some were buried with honor, some with violence, some not buried at all, just left to the earth. And the earth accepted them, and then we built. But there is more, because not all who were buried by accident. Some were placed deliberately, symbolically, ritually, buried to feed the city, to bind its spirit, to seal something into the soil. Human sacrifice? Yes, but not always in the form you expect. Sometimes a child, sometimes a slave, sometimes a king, sometimes a name, a secret, a curse. Ancient builders knew the earth does not give without exchange. To raise walls, you must first spill blood. A foundation is not stable until it is fed. They buried bones beneath temples, skulls beneath thresholds, hearts beneath gates. Even now, in old parts of cities, there are corners where things feel wrong. Not haunted, just dense, as if the ground remembers. Because it does. Modern cities pretend to forget. Construction crews find bones and box them quietly. They call them historical remains, archaeological context. They store them or rebury them in sterile plots. But that doesn't erase the energy. The city grew from that death. It drank it in, rooted itself in it, and the bones became part of its body. The dead are not gone. They are recycled. They are structural, part of the breath of the street, the silence beneath the car horns, the echo in empty stairwells. Every major city is a charnel house with clean windows. We have paved over the grave, but the grave is still there. And when you walk through the old districts, past the churches, under the arches, across stone that's been walked for 1,000 years, know this: something is listening beneath you. Something is layered into the mortar. And some part of the city, some deep, silent part, still answers to the dead. Before building began, something was buried on purpose. Before the city rose, before the streets took form, before the first stone touched earth, there was a moment. A moment when the ground was still untouched, when the air held silence, when the soil still remembered what had come before. And into that silence, something was laid. Not stone, not timber, but sacrifice. We do not build without taking. To raise a structure, you must first open the earth, and the earth does not open easily. It must be softened, fed, bound. Ancient builders knew this, and they acted accordingly. They performed the ritual of the first brick. Not just a ceremony, not a superstition, a binding. It happened all over the world. In Mesopotamia, a lamb was slaughtered and buried beneath the temple floor. Its blood soaked into the dust so the gods would recognize the offering. In ancient China, they buried the bodies of workers in the walls to strengthen the construction. In Eastern Europe, they placed the shadow of a man into the foundation by marking his outline with chalk, and some say the man died within the year. In West Africa, fetishes and sacred bones were pressed into the cornerstones to seal the spirits beneath the house. In Mesoamerica, hearts were torn out not for the gods above, but for the ground itself. It was not evil. It was not cruelty. It was exchange. The city would rise, but only if something was first given to the invisible forces that dwelled below. And not just blood, sometimes names, sometimes secrets, sometimes parts of songs, never to be sung again. Memory itself was buried so that space could be made for something new. Modern eyes look at this with horror, but the instinct remains. We still break a bottle on the hall. We still bless the land. We still bury coins under buildings, lockets under doorways, personal tokens inside concrete walls. We no longer believe in gods, but we still act like the ground is watching. In the stories you were told, cities were built by kings, engineers, architects. But in truth, the first act of city building was always ritual. The laying of a cornerstone was once a sacred act. It wasn't just about geometry. It was about alignment. Not with the sun, but with forces deeper, older, quieter. And once the ritual was done, the first brick was placed, carefully, silently, often above something dead. And only then could the building rise. This is not metaphor. There are places in Europe still haunted by rumors, where an unlucky passerby was walled inside a bridge or gate because the stones would not hold without a soul. The structure demanded more than mortar. It demanded presence. You see, the first brick is not the beginning. It is a seal. It locks something inside. And once sealed, the city begins to rise around it, unknowing, forgetful, but forever tied to what was placed beneath. Do you know what lies beneath your city's cornerstone? Does anyone? Was it blood? Was it song? Was it bone? Was it a forgotten name? Whatever it was, it is still there, sleeping, listening, waiting. And the city grows around it like a body around a buried shard. It never goes away. So when you walk the city at night, and you feel something in the silence between streetlights, something ancient, something just below perception, remember, before the walls rose, before the towers reached, before the markets buzzed with life, someone, somewhere, gave something up, and the earth has not forgotten. Look down, not with your eyes, but with your mind. Beneath every city lies a second city, a shadow twin, a hollow echo, a maze of stone and silence that runs like veins beneath the skin of the world. Some call it infrastructure, sewers, tunnels, foundations, transit lines. But these are only names, attempts to tame the truth. Because beneath your feet is not just utility, it is structure, it is intent, it is memory folded inward. Every city has a below, and it is never simple. There are catacombs that stretch for miles, tunnels no map dares to include, subway systems with sealed doors, passages that lead nowhere, or perhaps lead back to something. There are corridors with no official purpose, rooms with no record, lights that remain on long after the stations are abandoned. And beneath even that, there are deeper things. Subterranean chambers built before the city itself. Crypts, wells, old cisterns, forgotten vaults, megaliths, staircases that lead to nothing, or to places no longer meant to be entered. Some say the labyrinth began as a practicality, a way to hide, to store, to survive. But what if it was the opposite? What if it was not for protection, but for containment? What if the city above was built not for people, but to anchor what lay beneath? The myth of the labyrinth is older than maps. Knossos, Crete, the Minotaur. But the beast is not the point. The labyrinth is the truth. A structure designed to confuse, to disorient, to bury something alive. A god, a secret, a hunger. And so they wove stone around it, like a spell made of walls. And that story echoed. Every major city has its own version. Moscow's metro, 2 rumored tunnels deeper than anyone admits. New York's endless closed stations. Beneath Beijing, bunkers that sprawl like ant colonies. Under Jerusalem, layers of temple, fortress, aqueduct, cave. It is as if cities grow like trees, but the roots are inverted. Not downward for water, but downward for weight, to pin something in place, to anchor a presence that must not rise. Why do we fear basements? Why do we glance behind when descending stairs? Why does the cold underworld of a city feel more alive than its surface? Because it is. The labyrinth is not dead. It hums with memory, with presence, with ritual, and sometimes with breath. No map can hold it because it shifts, reacting, adapting. Not a machine, not a ruin, a system of thought carved into stone. The ancients believed the underworld was not hell. It was depth, a place of knowledge, a place where truths were buried because they were too bright to survive the light. And cities inherited this belief. They built down as much as they built up, because elevation is always mirrored by descent. A tower is always accompanied by a tunnel, a palace by a vault, a throne by a tomb. Even the language remembers: underground, underworld, subconscious, hidden layer, deep state, buried secret. The metaphors are not metaphors. They are directions, and they all point the same way. So when you ride the train, when you pass the sealed station, when the tunnel light flickers and something ancient brushes the edge of your thought, you are not imagining it. You are brushing against the true shape of the city, a shape that cannot be seen from above, only from within, from below, from the place where the maze waits and whispers. We are taught to look up, to seek the divine in the sky, to associate the sacred with light, height, ascent. Heaven is always above. The gods live on mountains. The stars are symbols of purity. We build steeples that pierce the clouds, domes that mimic the heavens, obelisks, towers, pyramids, each one striving upward. But what if the sacred was never up? What if it was always down? Beneath the temples, beneath the cathedrals, beneath the shrines, there are older spaces. Vaults, crypts, caverns, not built for the living, but built with intention. Not graves, but altars. Not prisons, but thrones. Look to the oldest places of worship. They are not high, they are carved into the earth. Göbekli Tepe, buried by time, but born in stone. The Hypogeum of Al Saflieni in Malta, an underground temple. Tuned to resonance, Ellora and Ajanta, entire sanctuaries cut into cliffs. The oracle chamber at Delphi, deep within the rock, inhaling vapors from the earth's breath. These were not places of exile, they were places of encounter. Places where the veil was thin, where voices came not from heaven but from below. Even in the great cathedrals of Europe, there are crypts beneath the altars, rooms where the relics rest, where bones glow behind glass, where the air is thick and the silence is older than language. We call it below, but in truth, it was always the core. The surface was a mask, the nave, the spires, the windows, beautiful distractions. The real presence waited beneath. In many traditions, descent is the beginning of transformation. Moses goes up a mountain, but before that, he passes through wilderness, through trial, through darkness. Jesus descends into the tomb before resurrection. In the Sumerian myth, Inanna descends through 7 gates into the underworld to confront her shadow. The cave, the underworld, the tomb, these are not ends, they are thresholds. To go down is to go in. The inverted temple is not a mistake. It is a mirror, a reversal of our assumptions. It says, God is not in the sky. The divine is not distant. It is beneath, around, within. Buried not to be forgotten, but to be earned. Why do so many dreams lead us downward? Why are the most ancient fears tied to caves, wells, staircases that vanish into the dark? Because we remember. On a level deeper than culture, we remember that the first holy spaces were beneath us. And cities inherited this shape. The deepest rooms are not always vaults. They are chambers, still, unlit, waiting. Some say certain subway stations were built on old shrines, not by accident but by necessity. That the city needed to continue the ritual, to keep the old space sealed, but not erased. Not all altars face the sky. Some face the soil. Some are carved into bedrock. Some are lined with the bones of those who knelt before them. These are not places of fear. They are places of truth. The truth that power does not always rise. Sometimes it sinks, and what is buried is not always dead. So when you find yourself underground in the low chamber, the echoing corridor, the basement with no map, pause. Breathe. Feel. You are standing not in the absence of the sacred, but at its source. Cities are not only built from brick and steel, they are built from stories, from memory, from knowing. But knowledge is dangerous. It can guide, it can liberate, but it can also burn. And once it is released, it cannot be unlearned. So, some knowledge was not meant to survive. It was not lost. It was buried. Beneath many cities lie more than bodies, more than walls, more than tunnels and drains. Beneath them lie archives, Scribes once wrote on clay, on bark, on skin, then scrolls, then books. But some writings were never meant to be read by the masses, not in their time, perhaps not ever. And so they were hidden. In Alexandria, they say the great library burned, but fragments survived, pages, copies, whispers, and some of them were buried, not to preserve, to protect. In Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a sealed jar lay underground for centuries holding gospels no one had read for 1,000 years, texts of fire and thought, voices too wild for the canon. They were not destroyed, they were hidden, buried on purpose. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in caves, wrapped in linen, tucked behind stone, not forgotten, concealed. Because knowledge is power, and power, when threatened, must descend into shadow. Cities are shaped not just by what they remember, but by what they choose to forget. And that forgetting is often architectural. A room sealed off, a floor concreted over, a vault with no key. We call them ruins, but some were never ruined. They were designed to disappear. There are temples beneath streets with walls still painted, inscriptions intact, altars untouched. There are basements in old buildings that lead to nothing unless you know what to touch, what to recite, what to bring. Beneath synagogues, beneath mosques, beneath churches, there are staircases that do not rise again. Why bury knowledge? Not always out of fear, sometimes out of reverence, sometimes out of strategy. Because not all knowledge is safe. Not all eyes are ready. Not all questions deserve answers. In the ancient world, scribes spoke of books that could not be opened without consequence. Books that sang, books that cursed, books that burned the reader from the inside out. Some were chained in temples, some were wrapped in gold and stone, and some were lowered into the ground. Silenced by soil, but buried does not mean dead. The earth remembers. Pages dissolve, ink fades, but the meaning clings to the stones. Cities absorb it, streets echo it, dreams carry fragments of it, and sometimes it rises again, in symbols, in architecture, in moments of inexplicable recognition. When you walk into a building you've never seen but feel like you've entered before. When a word in a lost language makes your heart freeze. When something buried whispers through the walls. There are still places beneath cities where knowledge waits. Not in books, but in form, in frequency, in alignment. Stones arranged not for strength but for memory. Rooms that hold no object but change the one who enters. Chambers where the city remembers itself. So ask not what is stored in libraries. Ask what is stored in silence, in sub-basements, in forgotten shrines and sealed-off tunnels. Because the true knowledge of a city is never in its museums. It is in the ground, pressed beneath layers of denial, wrapped in the dark, hidden like a flame inside the belly of the world. And it waits for someone who does not just read but descends. We think of cities as functions, as networks, as structures built for shelter, commerce, transport. But beneath the concrete and code, beneath the zoning laws and water lines, lies a more ancient idea. A city is not a container, it is a ritual. Not built, but cast. Not constructed, but spoken into being. Think of the city not as mass, but as language. Each wall, a word. Each gate, a glyph. Each street, a line of invocation. Together, they form not a place but a sentence, a geometric incantation. In ancient times, this was not metaphor, it was practice. Babylon was drawn with stars, its walls aligned with constellations. The ziggurats were stairways not just to the heavens, but to the very structure of divine thought. Jerusalem's temple was not just a building, it was a model of the universe, a fractal of sacred order mirrored on earth. Teotihuacan, city of the gods, aligned to celestial movements. Its avenues were calendars, its stones, equations. Even the forbidden city was crafted to mirror the cosmic order. Every gate, every chamber placed not for ease, but for meaning. City planning was once sorcery. The magician architect did not ask, "What is efficient?" He asked, "What must be contained? What must be reflected? What must be bound?" The map became the spell. Grids, spirals, concentric rings. Each form had power. The circle protection, the square stability, the cross convergence, the labyrinth entrapment or initiation. Some cities still bear the marks. A five-pointed plaza, a spiral layout, a city center that forms an eye from the sky. We call it coincidence. We are wrong. When you walk the streets, you are moving through a sentence. You are being read as much as you are reading. Your body becomes part of the spell. Your steps activate old words. You pass beneath symbols carved in stone, sigils built into floor tiles, numbers encoded in addresses. It does not matter if you notice. The spell was not made for you to see. It was made to hold you. Why do some cities feel heavy? Why do certain districts make us dream strangely? Why does returning to one old street feel like stepping into a pattern we can't quite name? Because the pattern is there. It always was. Some cities were built for power, others for containment. Some were meant to radiate influence, others were meant to silence what slept below. And a few were never meant to be lived in at all. Only guarded, only remembered by the land. We call these dead cities, but they are not dead, they are closed. Like books shut too tightly, like doors locked from the inside. Their spell is complete. Nothing more needs to happen. Modern cities pretend to forget. They build chaotically. They spread like oil, not like thought. But even then, even now, the pattern creeps back in. A central square, a radial avenue, a tower at the center, a river that divides, a shadow that returns every year to the same spot on the same date at the same hour. The old spells are patient. They reassert themselves. Stone remembers what logic forgets. So ask yourself, was this city made for you, or were you placed inside it to keep something working? What machinery are you powering by simply moving through your daily life? What words are you speaking just by walking these lines? Because perhaps you were not born in a city, perhaps you were born into a spell, and it is still being cast. We like to believe in closure, that what is buried is gone, that the past stays in the past, that history is still, tamed, neutral. But the earth does not forget. And not everything beneath your feet is asleep. Some things were not buried to be hidden, they were buried to be contained. Cities do not just grow, they guard. They seal, they press down, layer after layer, stone over dust, metal over ruin, traffic over silence. But even the deepest vault cannot erase presence, because presence is not bound by depth. It leaks, it hums, it waits. Think of the dreams, recurring, wordless, images of doors underground, of halls with no end, of whispers behind walls. of stairs that go down and down and down but never come up again. These are not dreams, these are reminders. In old myths, the underworld was not punishment, it was a domain, a kingdom. Its rulers were not monsters, they were memory. They were what came before, and they were never fully gone. Only buried, only sealed, only watched. You walk your city and think you are alone, but beneath the stone, beneath the wiring, beneath the rhythms of the living, they wait. The ancient ones, the bound ones, the watchers, the dreamers, the buried hearts of forgotten gods. Not metaphor, not legend, memory made presence. Every now and then, the seal weakens. A street buckles, a sinkhole opens, an unearthed tomb floods a subway, and someone says, construction error, erosion, time. But time does not choose where to break. Only pressure does that. And something below is pressing back. Why do so many cities have gates? Why do old districts form circles around a central sealed point? Why are there places even the locals avoid corners, tunnels, stairwells, entire buildings that no one will claim? Because some knowledge isn't lost. It's guarded. Because something is still there. Not dead, not gone. Just waiting. And the city is the lid. Not just for memory. Not just for relics. For presence. And as long as the pattern holds, as long as the stones remain aligned, as long as we play our roles and trace our steps and walk the ritual grid, it stays quiet. But cities crumble, maps change, names are forgotten, and when enough is erased, what was sealed shifts. There are stories of sounds beneath manholes, of breathing vents in places with no heat, of machines detecting rhythmic pulses beneath basements. There are reports of subway workers who go missing, of maintenance tunnels sealed overnight, and no one remembers why. People laugh, they call it urban legend. But legends are not fiction. They are leaks. Beneath us, they wait, not with hatred, not even with hunger, with intent. They were here before, and they do not forget what was taken from them, what was built on top of them, what was stolen and called civilization. They sleep in stone, and the weight of the world above them is not a prison, it is a bargain. But bargains decay, and when they rise, it will not be with anger, it will be with memory. You may not believe, that is your luxury. But the cities believe, the old stones know, and the air just before dawn still remembers their names. We call it silence. It is not silence. It is listening.